Well, it is week 37, day 3, and we're going to find that we're going to finish out this week by reading through the book of Daniel. Now, the first half of Daniel has a lot of stories, very familiar, very comforting, wonderful stories of faithfulness to God, which are definitely worth reading, and I'm so excited that we get to share in those. We read about Daniel, a young Hebrew man who he and his friends, whom we eventually know as Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, though those are their Babylonian names, not their Hebrew names, are taken up in that first wave of exiles from Jerusalem to Babylon. Now, in the way that the Babylonian Empire does this, is it takes the cream of the crop, if you will, the most handsome, the healthiest, the most intelligent, and puts them in school, if you will, university or master's classes, in order to train them up to work in the king's court. It's actually a pretty sensible idea. You get the best and the brightest, but you also take these young people who would have been revered even in their own communities as the best and the brightest, and you brainwash them to believe the things that you want them to believe, to become good citizens of, in this case, the conquering empire. Well, we don't see them quite that way because Daniel and his friends, these four in particular, these four young men, are dedicated to remaining faithful in their worship to God despite the circumstances that they find themselves in and the temptation to get along in order to make things go well for themselves. They trust first and foremost the God of the universe. So, as we read here in the first 3 chapters of Daniel 1, 2, and 3, a couple of stories in particular. Daniel and his friends demonstrate for us as we look at Daniel chapter 1 of how we can find ways to live by God's law and God's love, God's will, despite the demands that we find ourselves when we're in a foreign court, or them in a foreign court, us in a foreign culture. Well, what is that foreign culture for us today? Well, the world around us. We are not in Hebrews it says we're not citizens of this world. We're citizens of heaven. And so, what does it mean to be a citizen of heaven living in the world today? We also find that God provides means for Daniel and his friends to thrive while they are witnessing to their faith in the one true God. And so, as they put themselves out there, even potentially endanger themselves by making a claim for God, God protects them and provides for them. And then we also see how God delivers those who are faithful as we look at the story of the fiery furnace. Regardless of what the outcome might have been, and it was successful for Daniel's friends, in all of these stories, we see these young men remaining faithful to God despite their circumstances. My question for us today is, could the same be said of us?